Welcome to Budget Beauty, where I help you look flawless for less. Welcome back, and a very, very special welcome if you are new here. My name is Jen, and this is Budget Beauty. About 2 to 3 months ago, I put out a video where I was ashamed of 47 eyeshadow palettes that I had never touched. And I told you and myself that I was going to use every single one of those 47 palettes, and I would be back to give you my overall thoughts of the palette, as well as share some of the looks that I did with all 47 palettes. And I am back today with an update that I have successfully used all of my palettes, and I'm here today to share that update, the review, and the looks. So if you are excited, give this video a huge thumbs up. And if you're new or you haven't yet subscribed, I would love to have you here. Hit the subscribe button and click the bell right next to it so you never miss a single video. I do upload most days of the week, so you definitely don't want to miss out. I will link all 47 palettes down in the description box for you. You will also find all of the makeup that I'm wearing in today's video if you're interested in recreating this look. And don't forget, follow me over on TikTok for more beauty on a budget. So let's jump into 47 eyeshadow palettes that I'm no longer ashamed about because I've used them. Boy, was that a process. That was quite the endeavor to make sure that I strategically used all 47 eyeshadow palettes, took photos, but I did it. I'm really excited to share with you guys my thoughts on these palettes. Some of them I loved, some of them I was completely disappointed in, and some of them were absolutely dreadful. Dreadful enough that they'll be in my big eyeshadow palette declutter coming your way a little bit later this month. So how I'm going to structure today's video is I'm going to talk a little bit about the palette. I'll pop in some B-roll footage of the palette and some photos that I took of the look that I created, and I'm just going to give you very mini reviews of the palette because we have so many to go through. So let's hop in to palette 1 of 47. So the first palette that I dug into during this challenge was my bubblegum palette from BH Cosmetics. These are monochromatic palettes. All of these monochromatic palettes are a fantastic formula. I have the pistachio palette as well that I used and loved. Same goes for this bubblegum palette. It was absolutely amazing. I thought my look turned out beautifully, and I would highly recommend really any BH palettes, but especially their Sweet Shop palettes. Now, palette number 2 also comes from BH Cosmetics and is another one of their Sweet Shop palettes, and this is Cotton Candy. This palette is stunning. The shimmers in these Sweet Shop palettes are so good, and I think my look turned out really pretty, very vibrant, very colorful, but I really do love the BH Cosmetics formula. Palette number 3 I received in the subscription box, and this is the Eye Bloom palette. Now this is a pretty neutral, maybe boring palette, but I thought my look turned out pretty. Do I love this palette? No. Will I keep this palette? That's up for debate, but I do think that the look turned out pretty. The formula was okay, not the best that I've used, but certainly not the worst. Next up comes from Colourpop. This is the Blow and Smoke palette. Now this is a dupe for the Natasha Denona black silvery palette that came out not too long ago. I think that was called the Xenon palette. This palette is beautiful. The silver in here is absolutely stunning. If you love a good smoky eye, this is a much more affordable, I even feel like maybe a little bit better quality palette. Another Colourpop palette is the High Tide. Now this was a palette that I had on my list of wants for quite a while, and I finally picked it up. The formula of this palette is pretty good. I will say that I was a little bit disappointed in this palette. I didn't feel like the colors looked very different on the eye. No matter whether I used a lighter color, a medium color, or a deeper color, I feel like it all just kind of looked the same. So I have to say this isn't my favorite palette color story-wise, but the formula was really good. Also from Colourpop is the Lilac You A Lot palette. Now this is another one of their 9-pan monochromatic palettes similar to the Blow and Smoke, and this is all purple lavender colors. Now I liked this palette. I thought the formula was really nice. It was very easy to work with, very easy to blend, and I have to say that these 9-pan monochromatic palettes from Colourpop are really good. The next was a pastel palette that I received in a subscription box. Now I like pastels. I have a few pastel palettes. This one was only okay. The colors were not as vibrant as I was hoping. Even though they were pastel, I still wanted them to come across a little bit more vibrant. It's okay. It's not my favorite palette. I don't know that I'll keep it. I don't know that it will survive the declutter, but I'm glad that I was able to at least use it and test out the formula. Another Colourpop palette is the Child palette from the Star Wars collection. Now, I had heard rave reviews about this palette. I don't know what it is, but I didn't care for it. I felt like the color faded super quick on my eyes. Within a few hours, it just wasn't as vibrant as it was when I first put it on. Now that could be operator error. It could be the eyeshadow base that I used. I've only used this palette once, so I definitely want to use it again. But I was a little bit disappointed because I had heard such rave reviews about it. Not Normal from Alien Cosmetics, which is now called Unearthly Cosmetics. They did have to go through a name change. This palette is amazing. I love everything about this palette, the color story, my look, the way the shadows blended. You cannot go wrong with Unearthly Cosmetics. Even if you search Alien Cosmetics, the new name Unearthly will pop up. Highly recommend this palette. Highly recommend all of the Alien/Unearthly palettes. Next up is a Huda Beauty palette. This is one of her small palettes. This is the Topaz Obsessions. Now I got this palette in a BoxyCharm pop-up and I didn't have high hopes. But I have to say, I like this palette a lot more than I thought I would. I really like topaz-y, orangey brown colors on my eyes because I do have blue eyes and it does enhance the blueness. And I thought that this palette formula was really good and I really appreciated my look that I was able to make with it. Now here's a palette that I was pretty disappointed in, and this is the Colourpop Just a Glitch. Now normally these small Colourpop palettes, I have quite a few of them. You'll see a lot of them in today's video, have really good formulas. Again, I don't know if this was operator error, but this shadow creased so bad. By the time I made it to where I was going in the morning, I had just crease after crease on my eyes. It was horrible. I don't really care for the color story as much as I thought that I would. I was just really disappointed in this. And again, let me know down in the comments if you've tried this palette, if you had a different experience, but I was not impressed at all. Then I used the Saharan Palette from Juvia's Place. What I love about Juvia's Place is the colors are so pigmented and vibrant, and this one did not disappoint. I really like this palette. Although it's a little bit more on the neutral side, the colors are so bold and vibrant. They blend beautifully. Absolutely love. Back to Colourpop with the Tinkerbell palette. Now this is another palette that had rave reviews, and I liked how my look came out, but I don't think this palette is all it's cracked up to be. I mean, it's a good palette. It's pigmented. It blends really well. I just don't think that it's as amazing as people made it out to be. Now the packaging is amazing, but the palette, in my opinion, was good, but not as excellent as I thought that it was going to be. I received this little Ciate London palette in a subscription box. I was not happy about it. I was not excited about it. But I have to say, I really liked it after using it. I believe it's one of the only, if not the only, Ciate palette I own. And even though it's neutral, I found the look very easy to create and the longevity was fabulous. Another Colourpop palette that I was not happy with, and this is the Too Hot palette. This is another one that all the colors just look the same on the eyes. Now I understand that this is a pink monochromatic palette, but I like to see a little bit more color variation and depth, and I just didn't get that from this palette. The good news is I think I paid $2 for this palette on clearance, so I won't be sad about possibly decluttering it. Another Juvia's Place palette is the Nubian 2, and this one was an amazing palette just like the first one. It blended beautifully. It was pigmented. I loved my look. I really want to invest in more Juvia's Place. BH came out with birthstone palettes for all 12 months of 2021. Now I didn't buy all 12 months. I just bought the ones that interested me. And this is the Peridot palette. This palette is gorgeous. Everything about this palette is exceptional. The quality, the shimmers, the mattes, everything is absolutely phenomenal. I'm so glad that I was able to pick up a few of the color stories that I liked. These are still available and they're only $9. They're an affordable palette and the formula, chef's kiss. Back to Colourpop with the Scorpio palette. Now Colourpop came out with these little quads, all astrology related, not too long ago. The only one I picked up was the Scorpio because that's my sign. And this is a pretty palette. I like the color story. It was easy to use because it's just 4 colors to choose from. The longevity was there. This was a good palette. Now I probably won't pick up any of the other signs, but I am happy that I picked up the Scorpio. Also from Colourpop, another one of their little monochromatic palettes. This is the Baby Got Peach. Loved this palette. It's light in tone and it's peach, which isn't a color that I generally gravitate towards. So it's not a color that I have in my collection. I like the look that I ended up with, and this is kind of a unique palette to my collection. LA Girl does not get all of the hype that it should. It is such a fantastic, affordable formula. I have a few of the LA Girl palettes, and I picked up this Desert Dream Main Stage palette because I loved the color story. This palette did not disappoint. The colors, the pigmentation, the blendability, the longevity, a million out of 10. Such a great palette, super, super affordable. You can often find these LA Color palettes on sale at Ulta. I have quite a few of them, and this one was equally as good as the other ones. High Society, this is more of the green color scheme. I liked this one probably the best out of all of the palettes, but I didn't love this. Again, I feel like all of the colors look the same. Even though it's monochromatic, I still feel like there should be some variation and some depth, and I just get it with these palettes. Now here's a palette that I fell in love with. I love every single palette from Adept Cosmetics. This is the Plain Jane palette. This palette is gorgeous. Everything about this palette is amazing. I love the quality, the pigmentation, the shimmers. You cannot beat the shimmers in the Adept palettes. They're an indie brand, which I like to support indie brands. I love this palette. It's one of my favorites. Another one of those fun BH Cosmetics Birthstone palettes was the Sapphire palette. This one is my favorite. Out of all the ones that I purchased, this one hands down is my favorite. The colors are beautiful. It's kind of a blurple. It's a mix between blue and purple. These palettes, just the quality is so good, and this color story, I have to say, really blew me away. Another palette that had a ton of hype, actually sold out and was restocked, is from Beauty Bay, and this is the Wilderness palette. This palette deserves the hype. Everything about this palette I loved. I thought the mattes blended beautifully. The shimmers were so, so pretty, and there's so many different looks that you can create with this color story. It's deep, it's dark, it's grungy. I love this palette. I believe it is still in stock, and this is a $15 palette that has about $100 quality. It is such a great palette, so if you can get it, definitely get your hands on it. Poolside was a palette that I received in a subscription box, and I really like IBY. It's another indie brand, so I was excited to dip into this palette, and it definitely didn't disappoint me. The color story is beautiful. It was pigmented. It went on flawlessly. Definitely am a fan of IBY, and anytime I see them in a subscription box, I get pretty excited, and this is a really fun, kind of summery, bright color story. Another Colourpop monochromatic 9-pan palette was the Mint 2B. Now I have to say that this palette kind of blew me away more than I thought that it would. I thought it was going to be kind of lackluster and boring, but I was able to create a really pretty look with this, and I really am loving mint green and just green shadows in general. Sydney Grace Enduring Love is a palette that I have heard so much hype about, and I wanted it for so long, and I finally took the plunge and bought it, and I couldn't be happier. Sydney Grace formula is incredible, but the shimmers in this palette and the look that I created to this day is one of my favorite looks I've ever created. I have intentions of purchasing every single Sydney Grace palette because the formula is so good. It's an indie brand. So, so beautiful. Highly recommend Enduring Love. The Jaguar palette from Huda Beauty was one that I hemmed and hawed whether I was going to purchase, but I thought that the color story was unique enough that it warranted adding to my collection, and I'm pretty happy that I did. I love the cool toned look that I came up with this palette. I thought the formula was pretty good. Huda Beauty can be hit and miss, but I thought the formula of this Jaguar palette and the color story were pretty incredible. Another Alien Cosmetics / Unearthly Cosmetics is the Lure palette. This is my favorite palette from Unearthly Cosmetics. I love everything about this palette. This color story is my dreams come true. I loved my look so much. I mean, this green shimmer shade, wow, it is probably the best shimmer shade I have in my collection, and I just love everything. I mean, everything about this palette. Here's another palette that came in a subscription box, and this is the Ditto brand, and this is the Venus palette. All of the pans are shaped like planets. It's a very neutral color story. It was okay. I had higher hopes for this palette. I had heard that it was really good. The formula was really good. It was good, but it wasn't great where it just kind of blew me out of the water. It was okay. I thought my look turned out pretty, but it definitely wasn't as pigmented and vibrant as I was hoping. A cute little 4-pan from Colourpop. This is the Waffle Cone. I love this color story. The greens, the browns. This is such a cute palette. Really good quality. I love my look with this palette. I love that I can go with with a green eye and then just pop that brown on my lower lash line. I really like this palette. Excellent quality. Highly recommend the Ice Cream collection from Colourpop. Another indie palette that I saw on another beauty channel and the color story just drew me right in, and this is the Perception palette from Nomad Cosmetics. This is a beautiful palette. The color story, the longevity, the pigmentation, it's a great palette. I would rate it 10 out of 10. I love my look and I cannot wait to play with this palette some more. Another palette from a subscription box is from Ace Beauty, and this is the Vintage Dawn palette. Now I received this palette before Ace Beauty reformulated. Their new palette, their new reformulation is substantially better than the old one. But I have to say that this palette was pretty good. I love how my look turned out. I thought it was easy to work with. I didn't have high hopes. I thought because it was the old formula, I was going to struggle, and I definitely didn't. I have to say I really liked the Vintage Dawn palette. A cute little $3 or $4, I'm not sure, Essence palette is the Dancing Green. This palette is great. The formula, the longevity, the way that it was able to blend was perfect. Can't beat these palettes for $3 or $4. I think it's $2.99. It's either $2.99 or $3.99, but I really like this, and we all know I love green eyeshadow, and I thought my look turned out pretty good for a really affordable palette. I love Nomad Cosmetics. This is another company, another indie brand that I love to support, and I did pick up their National Parks palette, and I love this palette. I love the color story. It's grungy, it's earthy, it gives me all of those camping mountain vibes, and I love everything about it. The formula is fantastic. You cannot go wrong with Nomad Cosmetics. I plan on picking up all of their releases as well. Another one of these 5-6 pan palettes from Colourpop is Lyric. Now this palette I actually really liked. For being a neutral palette, I thought that the colors blended out really well and they held their own. Where some of these other Colourpop palettes just didn't hold their own, all the colors looked the same. I found that with this Lyric palette, I was able to use the pressed glitter and it was really pretty on the eye. It was very easy to wipe away at the end of the day. I actually would say that this is probably my favorite one of these little palettes that I tried. Another subscription box palette is this Espresso Yourself palette. Now, when I received this in this subscription box, I made a comment about how tiny the pans are. It's really hard to use this palette. Anytime you want to go in with a little fluffier brush for the crease, it's hard to just pick up that one color because the pans are so small. Now, this is a pretty boring neutral palette. It's nothing exciting in my collection. The formula was good. It blended out really easy. It lasted all day. Just the extra tiny pans are really hard for me to use. Another palette that came in a subscription box is this one from Illamasqua. Now, I had heard really good things about Illamasqua. I do have a few of their other makeup products, not palettes, but other makeup products, and they're really good. This palette was okay. It's a neutral palette. I have this color story 50 times over. And if you made me only pick a couple neutral palettes in my collection, this one probably wouldn't make the cut. Now, JD Glow is an indie brand where you purchase shadows singly. They are all duochrome, multi-chrome shadows. So you already know that I love JD Glow. I love their shadows. I've used these a few times since, and I couldn't recommend them more. For multi-chromes, duochromes, JD Glow is probably one of the most affordable options, and my look was beautiful. I got so many compliments. I get so many compliments every time I pull out my JD Glow shadows. Another Essence palette is this little Avocado palette. Now, this one I didn't have the highest hopes for, but I actually enjoyed it much more than I thought that I would. I love a green eyeshadow, and I thought that this one gave some variation in the colors, and it blended really well. I was pretty impressed. Another Adept Cosmetic palette that's a 1,000,000 out of 10 is Ninhydrin. I just love Adept Cosmetics. They are one of my top 3 indie brands. I buy every single one of their palettes. In fact, today I am wearing their Amet New palette, which is one of their brand new palettes. It's stunning. I mean, absolutely stunning. The shimmers cannot be beat. Like I said, Adept has the best shimmers out there. The Ninhydrin palette was equally as delicious as all of the other Adept palettes. My first Lethal Cosmetics palette is the Lethal collaborating with Teresa Is Dead, or the Lethal Is Dead palette. I love Teresa. She's one of my favorite beauty YouTubers, and her palette was fantastic. I loved my look. I actually shared it with her on Instagram and she said it's one of the prettiest looks that she's seen done with her palette. It's just kind of a grungy color story, which is my favorite, and I'm really impressed so far with Lethal Cosmetics. Here's another palette that I was so excited to get. I added it to my cart several times, then took it out, finally picked up the Flower Punk palette, and I love it. I love, love, love it. My look using that latter half of the palette was, again, one of the favorites that I came up with in these 47 palettes. The formula is so, so good. Kaleidos makes really good eyeshadow palettes. I have to say that I'm super, super happy that I finally bit the bullet and bought Flower Punk. From BH Cosmetics, I picked up the Puerto Rico palette just to have a neutral BH palette in my collection. As usual, the formula was fantastic. Per the usual with BH. It's a neutral palette, but I actually enjoyed this neutral palette a little bit more than I thought that I would. I'm very into color, so sometimes neutral palettes don't excite me, but this one was actually really good. I figured the formula would be good, and I'm glad that it blended really well as usual. Next is Colourpop Rumor Has It. Meh, it's okay. It's just a palette that really doesn't excite me. Kind of similar to the Just a Glitch. It's that pretty similar color story. This one, I have to say the longevity was a lot better than Just a Glitch. I didn't have any creasing, but I didn't love the Just a Glitch color story as much as I thought I would, and same goes for Rumor Has It. The Iona palette, I was pretty excited about, and I really, really enjoyed this palette. I thought that it blended really, really well, and this color story is something that can be used every single day. It's office appropriate, it's work appropriate. I was pleasantly surprised. And last but not least, the Sorbet palette from Colourpop. This palette is another one of their little 4-pans. It was great. I love their little 4-pan palettes. They never ever disappoint. And I like this Sorbet color story. It's another one that goes really well with my eye color. And I found that it was very, very easy to use. So there you have it. 47 eyeshadow palettes I had never touched. And I've officially used every single one of them. Now, I've really only used them all once, with the exception of my Adept palettes and JD Glow, but this is my first impression of these palettes. Of course, I will continue to use them. When you see my declutter, you'll find out if I decided to declutter any of the 47 palettes that I shared with you today, but I feel really good that I used these palettes in my collection. Now, to be completely honest and transparent with you, since then, I of course have purchased quite a few more palettes, and I have quite a few in my collection that I haven't used, but I am slowly getting through those. Stay tuned for my eyeshadow palette collection video as well as my declutter. And if you enjoyed this and you're proud of me for using all 47 palettes, give this video a huge thumbs up. And if you're new and you haven't yet subscribed, I would love to have you here. Hit the subscribe button and don't forget to click the bell next to it so you don't miss a single video. Everything I talked about will be linked down below, the makeup that I'm wearing in today's video, and of course, don't forget to follow me on TikTok for more beauty on a budget. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!